be here. I'm going to take a few minutes and be hopefully a little provocative and share something that I've never shared really publicly with a large group. When I wrote the first edition of Getting Things Done, and it got published in 2001, from that day forward, there have been probably 500 to 800 software startups and application builders and developers that showed up and said, wow, we could build the GTD app. And what is the best app? It's often the question that I get. And, you know, I've thought for a while about what's really game-changing out there. And someone recently actually brought me on as a project because they thought maybe it was time for a game-changing event in terms of productivity applications. And I mean game-changing. Now, listen folks, cool shit is not necessarily game-changing. I mean, the web is so way wicked cool, social media is wicked cool, but I wasted time as a 10-year-old with yellow pages and staring at laundromat bulletin boards. What's the difference? What's changed is a huge amount of speed and a huge amount of volume accessible to us and a huge amount of accessibility and a huge amount of elegance to all of that. So I love cool stuff. So if I think about game-changing, the first question is what game? And there are a lot of game-changing things in certain niches out there that I've certainly experienced. And again, this is going to be my experience I'm sharing with you here. The game that I've been involved in over the last 35, 40 years is how do we best manage the flow of life's work? And that this is really the art. This is not a one-time time management, productivity, kind of event. This is how do I start to live my life in such a way that the whole ecosystem of my experience, I'm able to get on top of it instead of feel buried by it. And not only get on top of it, patch up the cracks and the leaks, but also be able to optimize the value I'm producing for my family, for my projects, for my life, for any and all of that. And life doesn't show up in a pretty pink package if you haven't noticed. It shows up like this. During any 8-minute period, right? You could be dealing with your printer just broke. Now you got an angry customer on the phone. And then you got a text from your mom. Oh my God. And that's just in 5 minutes. The end of the day, are you toast or are you surfing on top of it? And of course, the idea of surfing on top of it is this wonderful martial arts idea of mind like water. Meaning, like water, you don't over or underreact. You give appropriate attention. You are appropriately engaged with your ecosystem at whatever level it is. See, folks, the real secret about getting things done is it's not about getting things done. It's really about being so appropriately engaged with all the elements of your life, you're totally present with whatever you're doing. Because that happens to be the most optimal productive state. The best state to hit a golf ball from, best state to fire somebody from, best state to cook spaghetti from. Nothing on your mind except what's on your mind. Very cool place to be. Now, I'm going to mention 3 people right now. And again, this will be unfair to a whole lot of other folks, I understand, but I had to make this short. And if I had to condense it, what was game-changing for me in terms of how I understood the flow of life's work and how we manage that? This guy named Ole Berg. Ole's still around. He's in his 80s. A Dane. He was a statistician on the Danish yachting crew. He was a formula racer. Kind of an international playboy. Very cool guy. Very smart, too. And what Ole developed was something called Time System. This was a paper-based planner out of Copenhagen. Got developed in 79, 80. I ran across it in the early 80s, and I think it was only in Danish and Swedish and German at that point. Wound up being the first distributor of it in the United States, got it translated into English because this thing was game-changing. This is a paper-based planner. I wound up using this personally for 18 years. Didn't find anything better. Probably in terms of paper-based planners, there's not much better than this once you see what's done. Now, there's a lot of pieces to this that I won't go into. But one thing I will point to you is what Ole built was something called a data bank in the middle. And the data bank was just 10 tabs, 1 through 10, and a blank index. And you indexed it for yourself. And you could probably go back to Filofax, which was sort of the beginning of people having to carry a portable thing that had valuable data. Actually, the British Army uniform had a pocket designed the size of the Filofax. for British Army officers to use in the field. That was probably the nascence of this. But the whole idea is, I asked Ole, I said, Ole, why'd you put 10 tabs in here? I said, David, whenever you're trying to manage something extremely complex, you will sort it down into about 10 subcategories so that you can control it. Not too many more, not too many less. Ask a pilot how many things they pay attention to in a cockpit with all those dials, about 10 things. If you drive a car, you manage about 10 things. Think about it. That you keep, and it's a very complex thing. But if you have to try to break all that down into 25 things, it'd be out of control, or if you only broke it down into 3 things, it'd be out of control. But 10 seems to have a magic to it in terms of how you manage something complex. So by the way, how would you manage your life in 10 segments right now? And that was a question this got me to ask. But I'd never thought about it that way. But then having the ability to program it myself as I got matured and whatever, this became a living, breathing personal management system that allowed me to manage the flow of my life work in a whole different chapter. Then, of course, the digital world showed up. And in the digital world, what was game-changing out there? Well, there's a guy named Mitch Kapoor. And if you ever get a chance to meet Mitch, great guy. Well, Mitch, actually VisiCalc to begin with, but then Lotus 1, 2, 3. Come on, guys, spreadsheets. That changed the game. It just changed the game out there. He also developed Lotus Notes, which also changed the game. I've been using the cloud. Wow, I've been in the cloud for 20 years. I'm still using Lotus Notes. Right? Not only that, in the cloud, it's totally encrypted, it's totally safe, and it's totally distributed. There's hardly any software out there that you can do that, and I've been doing it for 20 years. Mitch had a great concept there. The world didn't quite catch up, and he also built something called Agenda. It never really took off, but there were some very, very cool things about that in terms of being able to generate information and have it build a little artificial intelligence about how you sorted that information or how it sorted itself afterwards. Game-changing stuff. For me, this absolutely made a huge difference in terms of how I thought about both my work and my life. Then there's another guy I'm going to put in there, number 3, a man I only met 3 or 4 years ago, Charles Simonyi. I don't know if all of you know who Charles is. For a lot of people, he's the only billionaire coder nobody ever met or knew of. He was Gates' real first coder back there. And he built Word, he built Excel, and he built Office. Now, Lotus 1, 2, 3 was cool, but Excel really made it very elegant. I can't tell you how many businesses are run on Excel right now. Just that. And how many things you can do with that. You can translate that into relational databases, and what has that done in the world out here? Huge. Absolutely game-changing stuff. In 1970, you couldn't write a letter on your computer without a programmer. So what Charles did was he built software that organized software. Some of you folks just take that for granted, what's involved in Word. The reason that was so game-changing for me, and I almost threw Tony Buzan in here because of mind mapping. Because, I'm old enough, guys, I'm 70, and I'm old enough that when I wrote a college paper, my college thesis, I had to do it on a typewriter and had to use erase tape. Any of you, ask your parents what that was like. I mean, before you typed anything, it damn well better be good, because what a pain in the butt it was to change anything. So you had to be right before you could write anything. Guess what Word did? That's the way your brain works. You like to have ideas and later on figure out what to do with them. That changed the game. Absolutely changed the game in terms of how I thought about things and certainly how I expressed things literally. Huge. Huge. By the way, Charles started out with WYSIWYG at Xerox PARC. So, I could also throw that into the whole category of something that was probably game-changing. What else is game-changing? Not much. As far as I'm concerned, not much. I still use all those tools, but I have to be pretty labor-intensive about how I do that. Now, by the way, at last count, there are over 300 apps that purport to support the GTD model. And I've had one a week come to me and say, David, hey, look at what we've done, can you endorse it? And a lot of it's really cool stuff, primarily list managers with different bells and whistles, and some of them being shared. But that's not really game-changing. Really, the paper-based planner is easier to manage the flow of your life work than a digital screen, really. I mean, I've worked with 2 Thunderbolt screens before. Even that real estate is not as good as a good paper planner in terms of how it matches how my brain thinks about my life and can see relationships of multiple horizons of my commitments and keep it fluid and current. Well, at one point, I figured the computer would win. Those of you who are familiar with GTD, the weekly review is really the critical factor to keep any of your personal systems alive and well and current. And I was on a plane one time with my paper-based planner doing a weekly review, and I was going through my projects list and then looking at my calendar and then having to, oh, that reminds me. And then I'd flip over to the other part and then add a thing there, and then I'd look at something there and I'd go, oh, wow, and that reminds me. And I have this wonderfully creative, highly associational sort of bounce around, you know, in terms of my brain. But I lost my place. I said the computer could remember. And that's when I knew the computer would win. Ultimately, that a digital tool for doing this stuff and managing this stuff in this way would be the way to go. So I sat down for a little while later and just described essentially what I would want on a computer, what I'd want a software app to do. Right? By the way, if you're taking pictures of this and copying them, I'll have to kill you. I'm kidding. Not really, well, in a way. And this was actually proprietary information for a startup we started back a while ago. And by the way, the first screen that I'd want would look like this. When I got up in the morning, what I want to see is, first of all, I want to see my calendar because I need to see the hard landscape of commitments that I have. I also need to see time-specific stuff, and I also need to see stuff that's specific to the day, but not to the time. There's still apps out there that don't do that. God, you've got to create workaround in Outlook and Lotus Notes to create a day-specific event. You know, that's just something to do that day, not an all-day event. Anyway, and those are just some of the things that I want to see. I want to see that information, and I want to see that information tied to wherever the sources of that information are. Right, so that's my hard landscape I see on the right-hand side. If I have any discretionary time, I go to the left, I start to see all the other actions I need to take that I have already determined as engagement options, assuming I have discretionary time. And I'd also want to keep a window of all the projects I've got open out there. Now, that's an orientation map for me that lets me know that it's absolutely fine to take a nap or have a beer. Now, nap and beer are not on my calendar, by the way, but I do a lot of both of them. Why? Because I look at that and go, beer is better. That's a high-performance beer. Oh, come on, because look at how many things it's better than. Look, folks, you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what you're not doing. And most people haven't a clue, frankly, of everything you are not doing that some part of you has still wrapped yourself around and into. And by the way, you know, if all those buttons at the top, you know, I said, well, okay, by the way, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer. I'm an end user nerd. Oh, come on, folks, look, I love cool gear. Anything small, black, high-tech, and expensive, I want. As long as it has cool lights on it. Later on, I'll figure out if it actually does anything. But those buttons at the top, I want to be able to, by the way, when I get that orientation of the day, I want to be able to go up to any one of those things and say, okay, let me drop down. What would the drop down for those things look like? And that's there, and I don't need to go through and explain the details of it. It's more what the process was as I thought about it. And at any point in time, I need to be able to unload my head. That is, I need a constant virtual in-basket. Crazy ideas, stupid-ass ideas, brilliant ideas, I don't know. When I have an idea, I don't know how good it is yet. I'll probably throw away 80% of the ideas I capture. I just don't know which 80% they are yet. By the way, if you try to prioritize before you allow yourself to express and think, you're going to lose a lot of good ideas. Very different exercise. So I want to also build in my own triggers. If I sat down with any of you, I could just run through a list of things. Well, tell what projects have started and not finished yet. By the way, what do you need to do with your family? Oh, by the way, what are the things what else is on your mind? It takes most people 1 to 6 hours just to grab the stuff that's banging around in their head. And by the way, your head is a crappy office. You know, the new edition of my book that came out last year, I added a chapter about all the cognitive science that showed up since the first edition was published 15 years ago, that it basically validated the fact that your head sucks as a place to keep track of stuff. Your head was not designed to do that. They used to think your short-term memory could hang on to about 7 things, plus or minus 2, from a study in 1959. The new studies, basically, it's 4. That's about it. Because your brain, you know, developed very well to keep you alive on the savannah so you can eat and not be eaten, so that you can take long-term memory and pattern recognition and recognize that's a tiger, that's fire, there's a river, whatever. And very present, very brilliant about that, but you forget where you left your keys. So the brain was not designed to hang on to things, and yet the problem now these days is most people are using your head as a huge absorption sponge and keeping the stuff in there, and it's spinning around and creating an underlying stress that's not required. Anyway, so just you need a place constantly to be able to unload. Oh, by the way, if I go back to on the screen, I need to also, at the bottom, I need to see how many unprocessed things I currently have. I need to know what that inventory is. If you have 4,000 unprocessed emails still sitting in your in basket, I wouldn't trust anything you do. At least that would be a piece of feedback that I'd want to know how much unprocessed stuff is still there before I really start to make good, trusted decisions about how I allocate my time and my focus. And, if you're going to process your in basket, there is an algorithm there. That's why you techies love GTD, because it's all the subroutines about how you get your in basket empty. So there they are. And you could digitalize that. It could be digitalized in terms of doing that. Any one of your projects should be able to see all these different windows on it. You should be able to access that at any time when hey, I want to run down this project trail right now. I need to do some more thinking about that project. You need to be able to do that. So, and all the actions that you need to come up with. Those need to be parked in a certain way, and you also need to make sure that those actions are landing in the right place with a minimal amount of effort. By the way, somebody really accurately described GTD, especially from a software standpoint, as lean agility for the psyche. No waste. How can I think about something once in a certain way and not have to have that thought again that way? So I can externalize it in the external brain. So people, you should be able to see people. You should have your someday maybe place, a place to do all that. If you've got meetings coming up, there needs to be information about that you can pull, etc. Communications, all those kinds of things. These are the basic tools, essentially, and the basic dynamics of how we manage our intersections with life, both with ourselves and all the people around us. And those are all driven by your areas of focus. And your areas of focus, oftentimes, the best way to start to see all your different things. These are my family things, these are my health things, these are my finance things, these are my asset management things, whatever. And you should be able to design all that yourself. Be given the tools to it, but then you customize this as it changes and as you mature, as you think about it. And then, of course, your weekly review, you need to have that. You also need to have a coach in there that would help you do that. There's still, I don't think there's any software out there right now that I could pull up and just record and say, call Nick by Friday, and it would land on my calls list. It would put Nick's phone number on there. It would also go to my calendar and put it on Friday called, hey, called Nick yet, dude, ? I'm sorry, folks, this is not rocket science unless you're building rockets. By the way, all those slides, all those things that I just showed you, I did that in 1994. That's 22 years ago. And I can't tell you how many people have seen that, and we still don't have it. Frankly, nothing close yet, because all of that needs to be integrated. Now, you can do all those different parts. I do too, but I have to go find this over here, and then I need to go over here to then do that piece, and they don't integrate together in terms of one dynamic. Hard to do. We started to build a version of that back in the mid-90s. But then, and trying to build it all into one thing, because you need to tie calendar and you need to tie email, all of that very tightly together. But that's when Outlook showed up, that's when the Palm Pilot showed up. God bless the Palm Pilot. Anybody remember the Palm Pilot?
I do.
No better list manager. Really wasn't. So simple. And frankly, all that you need, folks, are orienting maps. How many of you have looked at your calendar in the last 2 days? Hey, that's an orienting map. You sat back and looked at it from a higher perspective and then located yourself in space and time and go, dude, that's ready for me. Good for you. By the way, all those people that I just showed you are friends of mine, and they're all GTDers. At least they all, validate that is basically it. As a matter of fact, I spent the last 3 years with Charles Simonia and his team in Bellevue, Intentional Software, some of the smartest people. Because we did a 3-year project to see whether the software or the market was ready for a next generation that would be based on something like that. The answer is no. Because most of you are still keeping stuff in your head. You don't think you're going to buy it. Why would you buy something like that? Anyway, you need orienting maps. Ultimately, you need something to put it in front of the door. It's just the door of your mind, not the door of your house, but same idea. So you don't have to work at what you need to be reminded of when. You've already figured that out. You don't have to keep refiguring it out. Right? What's the map you need to see before you walk into a board meeting? What's the map you need to see before you spend the weekend with your family? Your kids' issues, favorite things they're doing, what's up? What do you want to see so that you can add optimal value to your intersections with those folks? You find out you've got a life-threatening illness. What should you look at? So you can orient yourself. You know, Ryan's stuff is great. And could there be tools that could facilitate your ability to, you know, act and perceive and assert your will? No kidding. Absolutely. They're just not there yet. Ultimately, it should be a hologram. I walk into a room, it knows where I am, it knows it's me, it knows what my blood pressure is, it knows what my blood alcohol level is, and based upon that, these holograms are going to show up. That I have programmed what I want to see in those contexts, and you'll hear a lot more about context. You need the cockpit of your life, folks, but it won't happen by itself. You actually have to put cognitive horsepower to these things to design it, and you need to have a model for it. So again, what's the game? Well, a partial system is no system, and that's the problem with most of the systems out there, are the apps. They'll handle a part of this. There's nothing yet that integrates this in an intelligent way. And let me leave this one with you. Nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of buying public. Because quite frankly, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that a lot of smart people have seen a lot of this, and it's like the world's not ready for it yet. Now, I don't know how long I'll be, yelling in the wilderness, but who knows? Ever hopeful. Anyway, I hope this was provocative, interesting, fun, nothing else. At least a reminder that GTD is really a cool thing, so in whatever way you're going to play with it out there, have fun. Have a great rest of your life.